I have died my share of Najdorf deaths. Yeah, me too. Najdorf is complicated. And in fact, we're going to start taking a look at some of the games because there were so many, and I think, we're going to take a look at some, but you can also look on your own for a night of games that happen either in this tournament or like this year in top level. So we can go ahead and take a look. And of course, natural Najdorf moves. In case you don't play the Najdorf, and you want to get into it, you have to understand that in this position, right after a6, and it becomes a Najdorf, there are so many options. Like this is an option, bishop e3, bishop g5 is the main line, bishop c4, there is f3, there is a4, which we're going to take a look at, there is h3 and h4, I believe. There's knight b3 also, there's bishop e2, there are so many moves. There's bishop c4, I think I mentioned already, but that's a Saucin variation favorite of Bobby Fischer. So there are just a ton of lines, and it's probably what's so difficult to grasp about it. But it, knowing general ideas is always good. Yeah, rook g1 also is a move. Yeah. Even f4 I think is a move. F4, I think you go e5, knight f3, knight d7. When you make always the most popular moves for both sides, starting with e4, then you'll get the Najdorf. Wouldn't that be like a Ruy Lopez or like an Italian? I just feel like e5 is a lot more popular than than Sicilian. I may be wrong though, but I had that feeling. Yeah. There are a bunch of moves in this position. Knight b3 is a move. Yeah, knight b3 is a move, and it's really tricky actually. So yeah, there are a lot of lines here. In fact, I think someone played. Was it knight b3 or a4? Someone played. I think someone played knight b3 against me. Not just someone. Polina Shuvalova from Russia. She's like 2450, I want to assume. FIDE. And she's really strong. And the year that we played, she became World Youth Girls Under 18 champion and World Junior champion. So she was having a good run, and I survived with a draw. That's all I can say. But yeah. Yeah, for example, we're gonna take a look at a4 because that's one of the lines that came up. The knight b3, now that we're mentioning it, and like I said, I feel like today's lecture is going to be a little bit different. It's going to be more of a debate, discussion on the Najdorf rather than, me explaining everything. But knight b3 is interesting because, it kind of moves the knight away because before this tempo happens. So oftentimes if they play with e5, you can play for the d5 square. In fact, I think it's something like this. What did I play? I think I played bishop e7 in my game. But I can't say for sure. Actually, no, I think I played something like this. Did I? No, I don't know. It's been a long time. But yeah, it's kind of tricky because when they play e5, you can go here. And I guess it's kind of a little bit similar to those, what is the name? To those Sveshnikov, perhaps, Like when they play with e5, like you kind of tempt them to play e5, and then you put the bishop on e5 and you play for the d5 square. It does happen a lot in the Sicilians in general, but yeah, so that's a thing. Square on d5 tends to be very important. Like the square on d5 and the pawn on d6. Those are really important things in the Najdorf that you'll always kind of have to keep a lookout for. The pawn on d6 can be weak sometimes, and it is really nice if black actually manages to break with d5, and it is a good move. So yeah, those are some things to keep in mind. So yeah, and it does take everything here. It takes years of experience. Don't think it doesn't. I have played the Najdorf for like 9 years. And it's not like I can. It's not like I dominate it. It's not like I understand everything in it. I do know some, but nowhere knowing everything. So, but actually, a5 is one of the sorry, a4 is one of the things that was played in these games. And a4 is kind of interesting because, as you can see, it kind of stops the general Najdorf, queenside idea of the pawn on a6 and the pawn on b5, sometimes pushing for b4. And this is usually nice for black because not only do you gain space on the queenside, and it is useful in case, white plays some sort of like English attack where they castle along, but also because oftentimes the bishop can come to b7, and with b4, ideas of b4, you can put a lot of pressure on e4. So a4 stops those ideas and just looks to gain space on the queen side and perhaps play a bit more solidly. It's not, out of a4, you're probably not going to see an Najdorf where both sides are castled in opposite direction and they're just throwing pieces at each other. You know what I mean? So it's something to mention. Here, of course, you can play with e6, very natural. Something like bishop e2, bishop e7, castle, castle. I would say that a4 oftentimes transposes to like bishop e2 Najdorf, which is perhaps one of, if not the most solid line. So that's one thing to know. We're going to briefly talk about it later because that's a variation that MVL played with the white pieces more than one time in this Magnus Carlsen Invitational. So yeah, but it does transpose to like this type of variations, with queen c7, for example. And usually, since it's very interesting, something that I discovered in this line. So usually black plays for b5, right? They play for b5, and of course, in this case, that's not possible. So you may be wondering, well, what happens with this bishop? So this is all the mainline moves: king h1, bishop d. No, not bishop d7. Wait, where am I in the variations? Oh, takes. Yeah, takes and queen takes, and now bishop d7. And this is one way to play. And for example, if like a5, bishop c6, and you're solid. And also, if I wanted to show something, I guess it's not here. Maybe it was in another line, but there was something interesting that I was looking into. Where did it go? Maybe I'm just confusing the variations as you usually would in these lines. But I was looking into a line where you can kind of do a little bit of a different setup. But I guess this is also possible. I think there are also some ideas of coming with the rook to either d8 or rook to e8 and then bishop to f8. And that's another possibility. But yeah, essentially this bishop can come to d7 and c6 and try to put some pressure here, since the diagonal is still weak for, not weak particularly, but it's kind of like x-raying the white king. And you can't really play with b5 because of takes, and b6 sometimes weakens too much. So that's one thing. I've never lost a game in the Sicilian Najdorf. I'm guessing that's because you haven't played it. So yeah. Najdorf was my very first opening. That's crazy. I have mentioned it before, but when I was a kid, after 1 year of playing chess, I'm still a kid, but when I was younger. So when I was younger, after 1 year of playing chess, I told my coach, hey, I don't want e5. I don't want to play kids openings. I want to play something exciting. I want to play the Sicilian. And he was like, are you sure? I was like, yes. And then he showed me a few different lines. And Najdorf had the coolest name, so I went for that one. And I, of course, didn't know the mess I got myself into. Also, I am back now to playing e5, and like that's also one of like the top lines for the top players. So it's not really kids openings, but essentially the funny thing about it is that I didn't know the mess I was getting myself into when I was like 8. So um that's pretty cool. All right. So, but yeah. So that's one way of playing, but in the game they continued with e5. And so we kind of briefly mentioned before, right? How after you play with e5, you have to be careful because the main thing is the square on d5, and whoever gets to control the square on d5 better usually ends up with an edge in the position, right? Knight went to f3, pawn to h6. This is very common because of bishop e6. There's one move we want to avoid as black. Do you guys have any idea? Wait, I don't get that. I don't want to play kids openings. Thalia. Oh, and then Aronian says nothing. Oh yeah, he does play e5 quite a bit. I think he played it a lot in this tournament. So yeah. But do you guys know why you play h6 and not bishop e6? Should be very simple, you know. It's kind of being implied. Yeah, knight g5. So after bishop e6, ooh, bad arrow. After bishop e6, you don't want to allow knight g5 because it just forces the bishop to go back or do something different. So it's just uncomfortable. So h6 is actually very common. H6 is common. And for example, g3, this is what happened in the game. If bishop to c4, you can actually play bishop to e6 because it's different. You're trading for a bishop, you're not trading for a knight. So after takes, white is going to have a hard time, you know, trying to make use of the light squares because they also don't have a light square bishop. And this also opens the f file for black. So when they castle, they can probably use the f file and they have more support in the center. D5 is covered, right? They don't have to worry about this anymore. So that's why they can afford to play bishop e6 if the bishop goes to c4. But in this game, g3 was played. I believe this is Carlsen with the white pieces against Nepomniachtchi. I kind of pasted in a ton of games. And then I got a little confused with the titles. But I'm pretty sure that this is Carlsen against Nepomniachtchi. And yeah, so after g3, bishop to e7 was played, bishop g2, castle, everything makes sense, bishop e6, and knight to h4. Knight to h4 was played, and this is a very interesting idea. And if you think about it, it makes a lot of sense because you kind of want to, you know, have ideas of controlling the squares that your most advanced pawn. I guess you could argue that a4 is also the most advanced pawn, but not really. So you kind of want to look after the squares that your most advanced pawn is controlling, like of course d5 and f5. And it kind of makes sense to want to bring the knight here, first of all, because it wasn't doing anything on f3. Second of all, because if they take, you know, your bishop is going to have a beautiful diagonal. And also because it may allow, you know, the f pawn to move forward. So I think that that's a very interesting move. If I'm not wrong, it's a novelty. So yeah. h6 and a6 looks like a kid's game. Well, they have a purpose, okay? Instead of h6, if bishop e6, is bishop d5 good? Bishop d5 is fine, but knight g5 would be a bit better because you're putting troubles on the e6 bishop. But it is good. It is fine. There are in fact a lot of ideas of that. We're gonna talk about them, you know, a little bit forward. But there are many ideas of playing bishop g5 and bishop takes f6 in variations where the pawn are on d6 and e5, because the knight on f6 is one of the main defenders of d5. And as I was mentioning, the d5 square is very crucial. White then can proceed to do stuff like c4, b3, queen d3, rook d1. They can even try to bring the other knight to like f1, e3, and then support the knight on f5. On d5. I have seen a lot of this type of things, and it's very difficult to play as black with so little space. So bishop g5, definitely, it's one of the options in this pawn structure. Of course, right now there's h6, so you can't really do that. But it is one idea to give up the bishop for the knight on f6. So after knight to h4, which we mentioned, interesting move. Here, Nepomniachtchi probably should have played with something like bishop to g4. And let's say queen d3 because it looks natural. Knight f6 developing, h3, bishop back, rook d1, and something like queen c8, putting trouble on this pawn since you provoked it to move. And getting the queen out of the way, maybe this rook is coming to d8, and essentially position is fine for black, right? But instead, he went knight to d7. And it's kind of interesting how the position is going to start shifting now. G5. I think G5 is a little too much. I think G5, you may be helping the ideas of F4 that they have. Plus, they probably would go knight F5 anyways. It just feels like you're weakening your king side. I don't know if I appreciate that. So, yeah, but knight d7 was played. And the thing is that now after knight to f5 takes, now, as we mentioned before, like this bishop has a really nice diagonal. There's still a lot of control on d5, 3 pieces looking at it. And white now has a pair of bishops and black doesn't. So you'll see how it'll just turn to be very, very comfortable for white. Now that I said very, very, it reminds me of everyone in the YouTube chat for Chess24 is commenting how Peter Lecco says very, very natural, or like very, very bad, very, very good, for like describing moves. So that's funny. Yeah. How about something like knight c6 to d4 to prevent those knight f5 ideas? I feel like oftentimes you can try to do that, but you can be faced with something like knight to e2 and c3, or knight to d5 and c3. So let's say, well, I think right now you're not on time to do so, but let's say, I don't know, let's say you went here, right? And then the knight went to h4, and then you go here. I don't know though, because I don't know, to me it just kind of feels like it's going to be a bit tough. Maybe it is possible. Thinking maybe something like queen d3 to then do this and this, or like bishop e3, knight e2. So like if here, perhaps it can be interesting, but I am not sure. I mean, oftentimes it's kind of hard to do. But if the knight goes to c6, I don't particularly have to go knight to h4. I'm guessing I can do something else, like, I don't know, let's say bishop e3. That looks okay. Preventing this. That could be a move of knight here, I assume. Maybe this. And then you have the control of d5, probably. I assume that this is fine. Like something like queen d3, c3, and then bring rooks over to attack this now. Knight f4. Knight c4, knight d6, perhaps. So yeah. Lego often got freaked by Jan's moves today. Yeah, I mean, he did play, I believe he played very aggressively today. I mean, in general, he's an aggressive player, but I think I stopped at one point and like I was saying something like, I don't think I could ever play like him or something, because he's more perfectionist than technical. So that's something he mentioned, I believe. Bishop d3 sends the knight back, or a pawn is going to be lost. I imagine you're saying bishop e3, but yeah, that's also interesting. So like here, perhaps could be a move. I mean, there is this, so I am not sure, but can be messy. But yeah. However, I believe those options would have been better anyways than knight to d7, because the issue now is that after knight to f5 takes takes, you're not really going to have any source of counterplay for what you have lost positionally. So after queen c7, a5, controlling space and fixing the pawn on b7, rook to b8, bishop to e3, not really giving way too many chances for this pawn to do anything, go anywhere. So rook c8, queen to d6, queen to d3, bishop to f8, now rook fc1. And I feel like the move that is about to come is very familiar, I guess I should say, because if you're looking at this from the white side, right? Well, let's look at it from the black side real quick. How do you continue? Like, how do you make moves? Because it's not simple. It's not simple to know what to do. Like, for example, knight to c5. Knight to c5, there is just queen e2. Like, they are not going to take and give away their bishop or trade some extra pieces. They're going to keep the tension in the board, and they kind of just control a lot more squares than black do. So it's going to be really difficult to make moves. And already right here, it's not easy what to do because this is so well covered. d5 is so well covered. And you're lacking the light square bishop to, fight against it. So it can be really uncomfortable. g4, h4, g5 ideas. I guess those can be possible. I don't know. It depends. I think it makes more sense to play with h3 and g4, which is similar to what happened in the game. Because at least for now, I think they can kind of play with queen c4, and they can put a stop to like any mate that you are planning to do. So also you need to cover g4 when you do this. So that's going to take some extra tempo. And probably queen c4 can get rid of the queens. So yeah. But what I wanted to say is that this is very familiar because then black kind of played b6, and this is more desperate than it had hoped to be. It's more of a weakening, trying to get something back or something out of it, but it's just really weakening for black, and this is a really big mistake. Not only that, but I guess you're kind of opening the position slightly more. And we have the bishop pairs and the rook on the a file ready to, put pressure on the pawn on a6. So it just kind of gives chances to white, more than just, a space advantage. So after it takes rook to a6, knight to c4 happened, knight to d5. And real quick, if knight takes, bishop takes, knight takes, takes. White is doing crazy good, especially because this is not an option. Why is this not an option? Yeah, there is always en passant. So even if you play b5, white is going to take it, funny enough. So, yeah. I guess rook c6 is one good move, but rook a7 is just so much better. Because you're attacking the pawn on f7 with the bishop and with the rook. And of course, this is not possible. Blocking is not possible because we can just take it. And the rook is also supported by this queen right here. So it's kind of like everything works on white's favor. And if you take a look at this, you could argue that it can be drawish because it's bishop of opposite color. But this is still, there are still other pieces in the board, like the queens and the rooks, and the position is very dangerous because of that. And right now, white is not only a pawn up, but they also have the initiative, the open file, and weak pawn on f7 that black is going to have to take care of. And in general, when there are still similar pieces on the board, opposite color bishop is not just a draw because you look for initiative and you'll probably find it. So, just saying. So, rook takes b2, rook a7. Yeah, we talked about that. So, queen to d8 is what Jan played. And after b3, kicking it away, takes, queen takes, rook c5, c4, everything solid. Queen c8, knight takes, pawn takes, rook to a7, queen takes f5, bishop d5. Remember, this is a rapid game, so it's tough to play. But, after this, queen g5, they could have just played rook b1. But in the game, in the game they went, where did they go? Oh yeah, no, in the game they went here, rook b1. And after takes, rook b4, bishop takes f7, king h8, bishop d5 back, rook to c8, king to g2, rook f7, and the last move of the game. Yes, Giri won today. So he became the champion of the tournament. So what do you guys think was the last move of this game? Which I guess kind of makes sense based on stuff that we have previously talked in this class. And I don't know, just general sense of this position. What would you guys recommend for white? Yeah, rook to a1. Rook to a1, and of course it makes sense. The one piece that is not doing anything, just bring it into the game. Gonna get into a7, and how do you defend everything? There's just no way. So after this move, Nepomniachtchi resigned, and it's understandable. And overall, I feel like it was a very correct game by Carlsen overall, and I would say that the two biggest things in Black's play were this knight d7 here, allowing knight f5, and also b6 here, which, opens up the position a bit more. True, but it is all in White's favor. So overall, it just seemed like Carlsen was on top of this game the whole time, and he was the one putting pressure on Black. So yeah, now you know that even a4 is interesting, because why not, right? Yeah, so it was a very interesting game. And there are actually some other variations that I wanted to take a look at, which are very interesting. They were all played in this event. And bishop e2 is a line that Maxime played a lot. I don't know if a lot, but he played with the white pieces in this tournament against Giri. So it's really funny because at least him, I think others were doing too. Giri was going into the Sicilian with the black pieces. And then when he was white pieces, everyone kind of, the Najdorf, I meant the Najdorf. Giri was going to the Najdorf with the black pieces. And when Giri was white pieces, everyone like slightly avoided the Najdorf. So I don't know. I don't know if it's just that he knows it really well, and the other players can sense it, or maybe they just like all planned to not play the Grunfeld. Sorry, the Najdorf. Why did I say Grunfeld? That's another one of my favorite lines. So yeah. Hi Kubli, how are you? Let me give you your usual shout out. Everyone, go follow my friend Kubli. Really cool guy, good games, wholesome chat, wholesome people, wholesome conversations. So go check him out, get him to 100 followers. All right, so back to chess. So yeah, I was mentioning that I saw that everyone was kind of avoiding the Najdorf when Giri was on the white side. And MVL, one of the things he did as white was bishop to e2. And bishop to e2 is, like I said earlier, perhaps the most solid line in the Najdorf. It's solid because you oftentimes see short castle, and then you see short castle for both sides, and you're playing kind of more technical in the center, not really like going after checkmate. You never know, of course. You can't be too naive, but for the most part, that's kind of how it goes. And e5, knight to b3 happened, bishop to e7. One quick thing though that I want to mention. Bishop to e7, you kind of want to delay bishop to e6, because then the opponent may have f4 right away. But you play bishop to e7 first usually. And if they play bishop to e3, do not castle. Move order is so important. Play bishop e6. Since they already developed this bishop, when they play f4 takes, they're going to expend an extra tempo. So you're not really worried about moving your bishop to e6 already because of f4, because, they're going to expend an extra tempo too. So just my great advice to you is don't castle right now, because then, not g3, but g4, and you're going to suffer a lot. I can tell from experience. So yeah, just be really careful with that. I had this game a couple of years ago where I was just lost and I was trying to survive and hold on, and I did. I pulled like a miracle or something, but it's really not a great idea. And I played castle without thinking much because I didn't really know this trick. So just know that it's very annoying to play against. So yeah, if you're black pieces, just don't castle. Play bishop e6 here. Don't castle until they castle. How about that? Once white castles, then you can castle as black. So yeah. Hello, Sarah. My sister is playing the flute. I don't think you can hear it, but she's playing the flute right now. What a great time. What a great time. Delayed Kara's attack. Kind of, yeah. The thing is that, their king is relatively safe on e1. Like, there's no clear way to attack it. And then they're just going to start pushing, pawns on the king side. And that's very scary. So that's my one piece of advice to you. But after bishop to e7, NVL castle, and he had two ways of playing here. But I thought queen d3 was probably the most interesting one. And queen d3 kind of is going to play with the ideas that we mentioned of playing for the d5 square. So I'm most likely going to bring the rook to d1, and they're going to put pressure on the pawn, whether it is with bishop to g5 or just something else. But it's a common move. And after bishop to e6, bishop to d2 was played, rook to e8, knight to d5, and now takes, and bishop c1. Yes, so here it is what I thought it was kind of interesting, the way that they play. And as you can see, you traded the knights. You could have traded the bishop. It's a thing that happens sometimes. And then you do something like this to try and get the pawn back. But in this case, black didn't want to give the bishop up, so they decided to take with knight, and pawn takes, and then bishop to c8. And you may be wondering, okay, what is the future of this bishop now? It has nothing to do. You'll just see. So after a4, they decided they did not want to allow a5. to control this square, you know, to have ideas of this, to, you know, perhaps some ideas of that, perhaps some ideas of this. So they decided to play a5. And after f4, because let's say if you don't play f4, you play like queen e3 or something. What do you think is the main idea from black when playing a5? Anyone has any clues? Looks like an outpost for the knight. You mean b5? I guess you're right, but also, how is the knight getting to b5? Knight b4 eventually? I guess so. I mean, they can always play c3, though. So, I don't really know about that. b6, bishop e7. That's kind of close. They want to play b6, bishop a6, and eventually, you know, if they trade, you can put a knight on c5 later. So that's the idea. The bishop no longer had a good square on e6. It went back to c8, and now we're trying to find like a better, you know, outcome for it. So this is a very interesting idea. Like, for example, b6 now, f4, bishop a6, and the position is fine for black. And eventually, of course, if they take, for example, knight takes, and you can't really take and queen takes because of this. But you can. This is actually not helpful because it opens up the bishop from black. But eventually, this knight can come to c5, and the whole structure is rather solid. So, but yeah, it's kind of just doing something with the piece that stopped doing anything at all. So yeah. Yeah, it is a cool idea. So after f4 was played, because, you know, this is the game, right? Sorry, this is very confusing with like the 1,000 variations that kind of appear on chess when you have way too many sub variations. So, but yeah, this is what happened in the game. And then after f4, bishop to a6, takes, takes. No, this is not what happened. This is the line that I was playing. It's confusing. f4 right away happened. That's what happened. I wish you could see like how many lines I have on the side. That are just way too many. Kind of takes like half of the notation board. But that's fine. That's fine. But yeah, so f4 right away was played. Now knight to d7. You know, helping out so that if takes, knight takes. And queen to e3 was played. And now takes. Queen takes, knight to e5, controlling squares. Bishop to b5, queen, rook to c8. I think there was something I wanted to mention here. Yes, so I was wanting to mention that, yeah, I wanted to mention something. After takes, knight e5, bishop b5, rook f8, you essentially kind of give some tempos to white. Now it's their turn, and they can play something like, well, they played rook e1 in the game, but they can also play something like c4, and their position is very, very, you know, solid. Because all of the pawns are protected, they just have more space. This bishop is kind of awkward. This bishop can come to c3, you know, and put pressure on the diagonal. This knight can come to d4 and f5. But essentially, here, yes, here, knight f6 is a move. Knight f6, attacking the pawn on d5. And if, for example, they play c4 to just defend it, now you can take, and you see that f7 is not unprotected, right? So you actually have time to make a move of your own. as black, and you can play something like queen b6, and you're completely fine. So that's one thing that I wanted to mention. And it's just kind of has to do with like how precise the Sicilian is sometimes, because this is equal, and now this taking accidentally a little too fast with takes and knight e5 and bishop to b5. Now this is +1, between +1, actually 0.8 more or less, and +1 for white, just simply because they have more initiative than before. So, you know, I hope this shows you like how you have to be so careful with the Sicilian sometimes. And rook to f8 was played, rook to e1, bishop to f6, knight to d4, knight to g4 was played. And now really quickly, I want to ask you guys, what do you think is the best move in this position to proceed with your initiative and attack? Also, there are some threats of bishop to e5, so you have to be careful about that. Anyone has any clues? Giri played a very interesting move in the game. However, what do you think is the best way to continue? Do we play h3? I guess h3 is a possibility. I mean, I think bishop e5 can be very annoying. Yeah. Knight f3, maybe. Maybe. Knight f3, there could be this annoying queen b6, though. I think. Like, if knight f3, there could be some of this. I don't know. Looks a bit sketchy. Knight to f5. Yeah, actually, knight to f5 is the best move in the position. Very interesting. Knight f5, right? That's how we shall say it. Knight f5. And of course, the idea is that if bishop takes, queen takes. Knight to e5 now, king h1. And you have the bishop pair, right? So like b6, bishop c3. And you even possibly have ideas of takes and bishop d3, but why do that when you just kind of enjoy the bishop pair? So knight to f5 was really interesting. However, the move that was played in the game was knight to e6. And I would say that both of them are kind of them are very, solid for black. Black is the one kind of, no, sorry, both of them are solid for white, although knight f5 is slightly better than knight to e6, but both of them are very, very strong. And of course, the main idea is that we're going to try and cut off the bishop from g4, right? So after that, pawn takes happened, queen takes e5, queen g3. Unfortunately, most of white's advantage kind of just went away. And the bishop to d7, queen to b3, queen to b6, bishop b6, queen c7, bishop d3, rook e8. And overall, I would say that the middle game from now on was just mainly uneventful. Bishop takes, not really possible because of queen c5, right? So that's one thing. There are a lot of tricks. So queen to a3 happened to cover c5, queen to b8. What happens if bishop takes now? Have you guys been paying attention? What happens now to white? Yeah, queen a7. Very good. Very good. You guys are good. So bishop to d4 was played. Bishop back. And they just kind of went around a couple of moves. And then they had this really incredible bishop takes. Just crazy. I mean, of course, they didn't accidentally stumble upon this, of course. But as we know, pawn takes is terribly losing because of this. And there are ideas of queen h7. There's this rook in the game. There's queen g6 also. Everything is kind of hanging, and if bishop here takes rook queen g6, it's really strong. So bishop takes h6, you cannot take it back. But if you think about it, like how much does it accomplish? Because you don't have to take back on h6. You're not forced to do that. And that's kind of something that black kept in mind. And they played b takes a4. And the thing is that now things are a little awkward because this queen cannot get to g5. It would love to, but there's a bishop on e7 that is preventing that. And so after takes, bishop g5 was played, and now bishop to h3, takes, queen a7, takes, and this endgame was just eventually drawn. So, I mean, I can show you the remaining moves. So after queen takes, rook a8, queen back here. And I would say that the main thing in this endgames is don't allow your opponent to get too much counterplay because of your slightly weak king. So essentially, if you have a weaker king in this type of positions, try to, be mindful of that because there are still heavy pieces on the board. And this is, one of those cases where the kings are a little weak. And after rook to e2, queen went back, if pawn here. There's this queen g6 idea with check and coming back. So like if rook f8, queen e6. Something like this. So queen b7 was played, c4, rook a8, queen a3, and it was just so I don't know. I thought it was very interesting this variations, and I think it kind of helps for general Najdorf understanding. I don't think we'll have time, but I also prepared some stuff with bishop g5. However, I have kind of talked about this move before on lectures, especially this line with queen b6. Personally, I really like h6 here and then queen b6. Because if you were following the, I think this was a Nepomniachtchi against Giri game. If you were following their games, you can see that f4, queen b6, knight b3 was played, and very interesting variation. But if you play h6 here, this is not an option anymore. Knight to b3. Do you guys know why? Let me flip the board. Do you guys know why? I am not going to show you how to defeat my opening. That would be kind of silly. Also, how can you ensure that this is my opening? I don't know what the nope and no are referring to, but okay. So queen to e3, yes. And the idea is that you're giving a check, and f4 is hanging because before the bishop was on g5, right? So you have nothing to worry about. But here you do have a lot of stuff to worry about because the f4 pawn is kind of hanging. So, yeah. Just saying, that's one thing. But in this queen b6 line, I don't know if you guys were here when I was doing a lecture on this, perhaps a month or two ago. But I was talking about these lines with queen d2, which are very, sharp, of course, and queen takes rook b1. We even looked at, I think we looked at queen here. We looked at bishop e2, right? Bishop e2, knight c6. Should we do knight c6? Takes this. And we were looking at this, right? How would you guys play here if you were white pieces? Do I have any ideas? No. Okay. Do you guys remember? If you were here and you don't remember, shame on you. If you're new, well, there's nothing I can do about that. Yeah. Okay, I can go back to the variation right now to show you about 92. The only inconvenience about that is that d4 is hanging, but I'm gonna play it out on the board for you. You can't remember. Shame on you. Just kidding. I mean, especially if you don't play the opening, can be tough to remember. But here, e6 is a very strong move. We're looking at the Caruana versus MVL game from Tata Steel this year. So this move is really strong, really, really strong. So, yeah. The idea, of course, is that if bishop takes, then f5, like castle, f5, rook e1, like the file is going to be open. And if they take with pawn, which is really ugly, there are still ideas of f5 and f6 if you don't open up everything. So even some of this too. So in general, it's just kind of like a really sharp variation for black, but we were talking about this a little while ago. So yeah. And this didn't happen in these games. In fact, f5 is what was played. And then knight c6, of course, takes. I think people take on e6 with the bishop sometimes. I think taking with the pawn makes a lot of sense. And then takes, bishop e2, bishop e7. And apparently after e5, takes, bishop h5, g6, knight e4, very scary stuff. Castle, bishop g7. There's not much to worry about. So if you want, you can take a further look into these games and watch the commentary from the tournaments, like whatever round of the tournament. And I think if you go to Chessbomb and you just kind of look through the games, you'll see a ton of Sicilians and specifically a ton of Najdorfs. So if this is your area, you can go check it out because the best people in the world are playing it. So, might as well learn from them. So, and, they already put so many hours into their analysis. So we might as well, grab a chunk of that work that they already did.